One of the exciting things that we are seeing in research is the recognition more and more how physical issues can be the consequence of an emotional issue. And as a tapper, that's really good news that we've known this intuitively for a long time. But what it does is it gives us an entry point. That if it is an emotional root cause, if we clear that emotional root cause, and tapping is so powerful at doing that, it can also create physical healing. The problem comes when we're dealing with something physical. Is it something physical, or is it an emotional issue that is showing up in a physical way? Today in the podcast, we're going to talk about how I approach physical issues to see if it's physical, emotional, and what are the steps to make it easiest to create transformation with tapping. This is Gene Montrastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 544, originally aired December 7th, 2022. Hi everyone, I hope this finds you well wherever you are in whatever part of the world that you are getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. The reason that we're having the conversation today around physical and emotional issues is a number of weeks ago in my office hours for the people who participate in my coaching programs, my teaching programs, we do office hours where people can ask any question that they want. And one of my students had a client who had a physical issue, and she wasn't sure if it was a physical issue or an emotional issue and where to start. And so that's what we're going to break apart today. We're going to break apart how do we approach those sorts of things? How do I think about that? And what is the best entry point? Before we do that, two quick announcements. Number one, we have a free 10-part guide on how you can use tapping to eliminate self-sabotage. All you need to do is go to tappingqa.com, click on that big blue button, enter your email address, and every day for the next 10 days, we will send you one small bite-sized tool that will make it super easy for you to clear some self-sabotage with tapping. Then at the end of 10 days, you can pick the one or two of those tools that I shared with you that work the best for you, use them over and over again so you get the most out of your tapping practice. Second, I'd like to send a big shout out and thank you to everyone who supports the Tapping Q&A podcast. These are people who voluntarily contribute monthly to ensure that you can get this amazing free content. Not only do we appreciate them, we also give them a bunch of bonuses, some extra training, all sorts of goodness. If you would like to support the Tapping Q&A podcast and receive some of these bonuses, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/support. And once again, a huge thank you to all of the supporters of the podcast. One of the most common questions I receive in my inbox is, what are the tapping phrases for? And then insert issue. And I think the reason why this question comes up so much is that just because we understand tapping as a tool, and just because we understand we're experiencing something we'd like to transform, be it physical, be it emotional, whatever it is, that first step often is the most difficult one. Like, how do we get into going after the issue? Because as we are tapping, even if it's on incomplete tapping phrases and we're not even sure where to start, because we are tapping, we're downregulating our emotional system. We're actually making it easier for us to see what is going on. But oftentimes it's breaking through that threshold. And so when my student had asked the question, is it a physical issue? Is it an emotional issue? Where do I start? And this is a very skilled practitioner, a very skilled tapper. That's what she's bumping into. It's like, I want to make sure I'm starting in the right spot. And so I have 5 thoughts that I think will make it easier for you when you're approaching an issue that has maybe a physical and emotional component, but also I think just kind of overarching principles that will make a difference. So thought number 1, it doesn't actually matter where we start. What is most important is that we start. The reality is, when we are feeling emotion of any sort, and even if there's a physical issue, there's probably an emotional component to it because we don't like having the physical issue. That's an emotion. Simply tapping on the tapping points without saying anything at all is just going to immediately start to downregulate our emotional response. And as our emotions come down, we get all sorts of clarity. I mean, I've seen this for years and years and years in my own tapping, and I've seen it for years and years and years with my clients, where we'll be tapping along and they'll be like, I'm frustrated, I'm frustrated, I'm frustrated. And by the fifth or sixth tapping point, they're like, I'm frustrated because. And all of a sudden, they have vocabulary to describe what is going on. And it's not that the tapping magically gave them words, but the tapping was calming them down emotionally. And as they calmed down emotionally, they got more and more access to that critical function, that front of their brain that is solving problems and is understanding what is going on. So when in doubt, just start. And when you start, you can be in a circumstance where it's just like, right now I'm starting to tap because I have this issue and I don't know what to say and I don't know which direction to go and I don't know how to tune into it. And I'm frustrated by the fact I don't even know where to start. And just doing that, getting that motion going with your tapping is going to make diving into the process an easier process to do. The second thing that I think is really, really important to recognize is that we create these boundaries. We say there is my physical self, my emotional self, my spiritual self, my higher self, an inner child part, a part that's trying to keep me safe. And the reason why we create those distinctions is it makes it significantly easier to have vocabulary and to think about our experience. It makes it easier for me to tap if I'm only thinking about the discomfort in my second toe versus discomfort in my body or just the sense of discomfort. But on some level, where does my toe stop and my foot begin? Yes, there are bones, but there's muscles, there's skin, there's tendons that overlap. There is communication through the biochemical parts of my body, through the bloodstream, through my nervous system. And so it's really, really hard to know when one stops and the next begins. The same is true with our physical and emotional self. At one end of the spectrum, I can be really, really angry. At the other end of the spectrum, I can have a torn rotator cuff. But as we get to the middle of that spectrum, at what point does it stop being a headache and start being anger, or vice versa? And so it's really important that as we're approaching our body through this disposition of parts, as we're approaching it through a sense of a physical issue and an emotional issue, it's important for us to recognize that there's no real difference between them. We just create the differences as an entry point. And so I find when I'm struggling and I'm entering into something, if I know if it's emotional, if I know it's physical, or which is the best way to enter in, is I like to start tapping on the fact that I don't know. Right now, I'm dealing with this thing that has a physical component and it might have an emotional component to it. And if I clear the emotional component, then I'm going to have relief with the physical component. But because it's unknown, I don't know where to start. And I'm okay with that because I'm just going to tap. And the first thing that does is it takes the stress and pressure off of getting it right. But the second is I'm tapping. I found a way in. Just like we talked about in that last part, it's just important to start. Well, here's a venue, another way to think about it. And so to give yourself permission to recognize that even though we're thinking about it in separate ways, all of it is our experience. And it's okay to not know what is the leading edge and what is the place that we're supposed to enter in through. Because the reality is that the emotional part or the physical part, they're just different doors that are going into the exact same house. It's no different than a front door and a side door, or a front door and a back door. It's just different ways of entering into the space that is me. And sometimes one is easier to go through than the other. And so we start at the place that is easiest. The next thing I like to think about as I'm navigating this is I really love to tap on the emotion about what is going on. And that could be the emotion about the discomfort. I'm really frustrated that my toe hurts right now because walking around is really uncomfortable and it slows me down and it makes my day less enjoyable. Or the emotion could be, my body is betraying me again. Or the emotion could be, boy, I don't even know where to start and this just sucks. But starting with the emotion about the issue, again, gives us this entry point. And you'll notice the things that we've talked about so far: tap just to tap because I don't know what to do. Tap because I don't know if it's physical or emotional and I'm okay with that. Tap on, I'm experiencing this thing and I'm feeling this, and this is how I'm responding to it. And clarity comes when we do that. The last thing that I would offer up as we're trying to figure out what is the best entry point, is it emotional, is it physical? I really love trying to gather information from the physical discomfort itself, and I pretend that that physical discomfort has agency and it can communicate. And so as I tune into discomfort, and again, I'll tune into the discomfort that is in my toe, I just tune into that discomfort and I ask the discomfort, what are you afraid of, or what do you think is going to go wrong? And as I do that right now, what I hear from my body is, this is a sign that you are a middle-aged man and your body is slowly breaking down. Now, that emotion that just arose as I asked that question might have everything to do with what is going on inside of my toe, and it might not, and it just be emotion that is in the way of healing and transformation. But regardless of what it is, the fact that I accessed it in that way makes it easier for me to understand what is going on and makes it easier for me to have something to tap on. And so when we ask the question of the physical wound, what are you afraid of, or what do you think is going to go wrong? Oftentimes the story is going to show up in that particular way. So the next time you are faced with, is it physical or is it emotional? First of all, give yourself permission to know it doesn't matter. It's useful to have information, but it's not necessary for transformation. That we should start with whatever information we have, even if that is as simple as, I have this thing and I don't know what's going on, and I'm frustrated by the fact that I don't know what's going on. And then lastly, taking that particular discomfort, asking it, what is it worried about? See what information our subconscious mind brings forward as giving us one more entry point to go after what is going on. So that is how I think about, and that is how I approach, is it physical, is it emotional, and what do I do when I'm tapping on something like that? Again, the most important thing is to tap, and as you tap, more information will come. If you found this useful, please pass it along to someone in your life. They might not know that they need to hear this today, but you know what they're struggling with. And don't go spamming your inbox and sending it to everybody in the world. But there might be one or two people who you could send this to and say, hey, I'm thinking of you today. This might be useful. And the fact that you've reached out will make a difference to them. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the podcast. In podcasting parlance, subscribe is free. All you need to do is go anywhere you get audio online. You can go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, basically anywhere you get audio. Just search for Tapping Q&A, for Tapping Question and Answer. Click follow, click subscribe. Most importantly, turn on those notifications so that each time a new content comes out, you are notified right away. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have a topic you'd like us to cover in the future, I'd love to hear from you. I can always be reached at support@tappingqa.com. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Montrestelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Montrestelli Tapping Q&A. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Montrestelli and Tapping Q&A.